Drink the Nation is a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably with a pour in hand. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the hosts and guests only and do not reflect the views of any employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or family members, especially our family members. They've asked us to be very clear about that. This show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. If you're in crisis, call a professional. If you're mad at something we said, we suggest journaling or emailing us with civility. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers. We're clinicians, not your clinicians, and we have the bourbon to prove it. Let's go. All right, welcome back to Restraint. If you felt like the last week political news made you tired instead of informed, good. That's the nervous system doing its job. Speeches are louder, symbols are bigger, everything feels urgent, historic, and personal. Tonight isn't about taking sides. It's about stepping back far enough to see the pattern. Because once you see the pattern, the panic loses its grip. This episode isn't here to rile you up. It's here to give you something rare, orientation. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And no, everything is not on fire. Let's slow this down and talk about what's actually happening. I'm David. I got my 20 plus in the military. I'm a board certified psychiatrist. And tonight I'm enjoying Tradewater Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey with a sour mash. A little small batch from Barton's 1792. Still good. I just didn't finish it last time. Just got another run to see if I can make it through a half a bottle of whiskey. We'll see.
All right.
Hopefully not.
Right. Let's make that happen.
After the week that we've had.
Right. If there's an evening to do this on, it's after the week we've had. I'm Rob, 30 years in the military and 25 in psychiatry. Since David broke the frame last week and made me feel a little jealous doing shout outs to local breweries, was traveling through the southeastern section of the beautiful state of Ohio, came across a beer by a small brewery called Jackie O's, and it's called Mystic Mama, which lovely can.
It is. It's nice.
Yeah, apparently that's a microbrewery thing. I guess you got to get attention some way in a crowded, refrigerated section.
We need to get our cans all dressed up, and maybe people will listen to us more.
Right. We might want to take a page out of their playbook. Anyway, IPA, it's lovely.
Looks lovely. Which part of the dumpster fire should we go after first? We're calling this one the comeback sermon. Trump's address frames the year as a turnaround story. Inherited problems, decisive action, restored respect/prosperity, with the familiar architecture of enemies and obstruction.
Sorry, I was only half listening. I was waiting for you to shout out.
Right. Tonight, we're not fact-checking the speech. We're asking why it sounded the way it did and what it means when reassurance starts replacing responsibility. So let's start there.
Before we jump in, we've picked 3 topics this evening, as we normally do. All the topics actually have a theme here. That theme that I'm hoping that we can explore and help both us and our listeners understand is that of the Avatar. And I'm not talking about the cartoon, which was amazing, by the way. I used to watch with my son. We ask a lot of our president. We ask a lot of that role. We heap a lot of responsibility and a lot of expectations, a lot of our hopes, frustrations on that person. So their job is to hold that. Hopefully, their job also is to do the job, to be the president and to make decent decisions and to drive the nation forward. I'm not diagnosing anybody. Last week, we played a bit of a thought experiment, imagined scenario in which a federal leader has a narcissistic personality structure. We suspended disbelief long enough to play that thought experiment. I'm not making a diagnosis here, although at some point we should talk about the Goldwater rule and why it really doesn't apply. What I'm really talking about is a structure and a role, a narcissistic personality structure and the role of avatar for this nation. And what I think we're seeing is oftentimes those with a narcissistic structure are incredibly well designed for the pursuit of power, but they're very poorly designed to hold power. They begin to collapse under the weight of becoming that avatar. They thrive when they really don't have responsibility, when they're pursuing power, when they can make any promise, anything, and they're really not held accountable. But then when they get into the position of authority, once they've taken on the hopes and dreams of the people that supported them, the weight of it, the complaints, the disagreements, the hints that they're not as grandiose as they prefer to believe they are, they start to collapse. And when they start to collapse, rather than turning inward, they turn outward and they rely on spectacle. They rely on narrative. And what I think we saw with that speech was an attempt to control a narrative. And it reminded me of like going to one of my employees and having them write their own year-end review. Tell me all the good things you did so that you can get a raise this year. And off they go, making everything seem significantly better than it actually is.
So I struggle with this concept that the projection that's being placed upon this particular president is something that was not invited. Yes, we obviously place so much on our presidents that classically does occur. In this particular circumstance, this was invited. This was hours long speeches going on and on about how this particular person was going to fix everything and it was going to happen immediately, and that it would be something economically all was going to be great. Everything was going to be huge. Everything was going to be wonderful. So yeah, there's a lot of projection. However, this may have been invited just a tad. Now we see this speech framing the entire year as this turnaround story. I inherited all these issues. I made all these changes and everything is better.
I concur with you. This is invited projection. And it, I'm sure, felt amazing on the campaign trail for President Trump that in that position, he could have all the adulation, zero responsibility. The real test is when someone transitions from pursuing power to being in power. And once you're in power, the test is actually humility. The reality, and I think you've said this in the past, we expect so much of a president. And yes, of course, 50% of the population is going to dislike you at any time. That's got to be a lot to manage. And I imagine it is. I mean, I'm not in that position. I've been in plenty of leadership positions. If your poll numbers are 51%, hey, I'm really kicking ass. But having been in leadership positions, I know it is challenging to have a significant proportion of the people you lead disagree with you. It's just challenging, and it requires humility. Humility is this individual's, this president's predator, wolf's bane, if you will. And he's stuck at this particular juncture because he's really running out of people to blame. And what we're seeing and what we saw in that speech was still no personal responsibility. No, this is mine. I am the leader. It was looking backwards at past leaders and saying it was their fault. They screwed it up. Only I can fix it. And look what I've done. Now, as time passes, that becomes a weaker and weaker argument. And what I believe we're seeing is that early phases of the cracks. The avatar is getting ready to disintegrate, and it's just going to get worse.
It would only be fair, I think, to offer up the arguments in favor of Trump as president. Why was he elected in the first place? Why not? When for decades you have voters who are experiencing stagnant wages, rising housing costs, declining trust in media and government, although one could certainly make an argument that that was contributed to by the president. And then by partisan promises that don't materialize, the appeal to Trump is that he names the failure bluntly and then refuses to pretend like the system's working. You don't hire a wrecking ball because you love wrecking balls. You hire one because the building won't change. And essentially, people didn't want politeness when they felt ignored. They wanted recognition, which is something that he absolutely gave them. It's a big reason why he was chosen in the first place.
He took complexity and simplified it.
Yes, absolutely.
One could argue oversimplified it. One could argue made promises of, on day one, I am going to end the war in Ukraine. On day one, I am going to do X, Y, and Z. It was unreasonable, magical thinking, but it was simplified thinking. And as you just pointed out, there's some really complex problems at this juncture. And we could probably spend the next 50 minutes just ticking through the challenges of this moment. Everything from the impact of social media to AI, stagnant wages, loss of industry jobs, inflation, affordability. Now, as it turns out, paying for health insurance and Jeffrey Epstein files still haven't been released, and on it goes.
You make a really good point, though. His value to supporters wasn't primarily legislative. It was emotional regulation. He has the tendency to speak with certainty in uncertain times. He refuses elite language, and he projects confidence when others hedge. People would say they don't like everything he does, but when he speaks, he sounds like someone in control. Anxiety in this case is looking for clarity, not nuance. which is something that he provides. He provides clarity without getting into the weeds of how am I actually going to achieve that, which is calming. But the other thing too is like they don't see him as moral. They see him as being honest about being immoral, especially in a system that they already think is corrupt. And they'll say, at least he's not pretending. They're more offended by the perceived dishonesty than by actual bad behavior. He definitely projects that wonderfully. He doesn't apologize for the things he's done. If anything, he's blames everyone else for calling him out on it in the first place. He at least says, yeah, I did that. So what?
Well, I would say he doesn't say, I did that. He'll say, no, I didn't, even if there's video evidence to support that, yes, I did. I did
Okay,
it
fair enough.
yesterday, in fact.
I think, though, people who like him understand that he does these things and appreciate that he doesn't try to hide it. Even when he says, I didn't do it, well, it's right there. I mean, it's very clearly.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to hide it in the moment. He certainly isn't doing most of these things behind closed doors. It's out there for all to see. They like that about him.
And there is an interesting dynamic at this time that fundamentally most people do not trust institutions. And those are all institutions. Historically, there were some untouchable institutions. And at this particular time, those are even starting to be untrusted, such as the military. That was always a incredibly highly trusted institution. And people's trust in the military and what the military potentially, the risks, all of a sudden has become a part of the zeitgeist, a part of the concern. In fact, just this morning, I was watching the news and that was a big portion of it was a recent interview with one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, basically being posed the question of, I forget the exact wording on the question, but the gist of it was, would you attack American people? And he said, I will follow legal orders. Now, from an internal standpoint, I think that was a hedge. I think that was him saying, that's clearly an illegal order. I'm not going to follow it. But rather than posing it in such a way saying, no, I will not do that, the statement was in a little more nebulous kind of frame. However, it leaves room for interpretation. A good example of why the people of the population is distrustful or has a growing distrust for the military. But it's across the board. It's most institutions. An honest politician at this particular juncture, if they are inside the system, regardless of how honest they are, even actually probably because of their level of honesty, it does seem to invite distrust by a certain percentage of our fellow citizens because there's this sense that everything's going to be hidden anyway. And the fact that Trump does do much of what he does right out in the open, just right there, right in front of you. It almost fools us into thinking it can't be wrong. It's right there. There's been many things that have been done that have been obviously illegal or wrong, but they're done in the open.
What ultimately ends up happening over time is what I think what we're seeing was when at least he's honest, quietly becomes honesty no longer matters. It's a race to the bottom, not transparency.
Race to the bottom.
Kind of go back to one of the first argument of him being a wrecking ball. Well, that can be helpful when a wrecking ball is necessary, but it can expose rot within the system. Wrecking balls don't build replacement structures. Wrecking balls are wrecking balls. They tear things down, but without some kind of plan to reconstruct, now you have deeper distrust in a system. You have broken things that were already broken, but now they just flat out don't work. And then people become more dependable on these personalities, not less so. And that is a problem, one might argue.
One might argue. To our tens of listeners, David just went out in the extreme stance of, that might be a problem.
Might be a problem.
in the calmest voice you could possibly come up with. That might be a problem. It might be a problem.
Maybe not the
No,
best.
I like the wrecking ball analogy a lot more than your previous. What was it? The chariot and the horses and the audience and the emperor.
The superego and the id, my friend.
Right. That's a throwback to way back to the beginning that I would imagine most people haven't listened to. Yeah. Now for this speech, he was clearly trying to control the narrative. I did find it difficult to watch, largely because that's just not his environment. He does require a live audience. He feeds off the energy in a live audience. And when he's just doing a teleprompted speech in a room in the White House, it almost feels weird because his energy level that he's trying to project doesn't fit. There's not the kind of calmness that you've seen in prior presidential addresses, folks who are good at these sorts of things. He's just not. He's not really a spectacular speaker in that way. He is a good audience guy. He is a carnival barker is what he is. He can get people hyped up. That's a skill of his, and it's one he's actually really good at, better than most, better than many, maybe one of the best. But in this case, just the delivery was weird. It was energy that had no real place to go. And then additionally, it was, at least from my read on it, is that there was no point in which there was personal responsibility. It was prior responsibility. Look what all the bad guys did, and I'm doing this. But it wasn't like I'm responsible for moving forward. It wasn't like that. It was like everything was broken before. Now it's perfect. We're the best ever, and we're ready to shoot off to the moon. And it didn't feel very real. It didn't feel realistic, which again, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking this is starting to collapse. And if I fast forward, I mean, we're 11 months in. If it's already collapsing now, wait another year when there just really isn't any viable thing, people to blame. And the other fear I had.
Wait, hold on. Did you just say there weren't viable people to blame? I think plenty of blame will go around.
That was the other fear, is that when you can no longer blame the prior administration, when you can't lay it at their feet, that blame has to find some place. And I know where it's not going to be. I know where it's not going to fall. So it's going to fall on others. And that might be, in the mortal words of David, that might be a problem.
Just the timing of the speech to begin with, I think already shows the cracks. When you have the polls as not great as they have been, the timing of the speech, this wasn't a speech that was coming out here to say, hey, and I thought that there would be some kind of announcement to something. There would be, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But this was
apparently we're going to take off. I mean, we're shooting to the moon, people.
Definitely, this felt like the speech and the timing of it and the tone of it was, I'm starting to feel the pressure of this position. The polls are showing that things aren't as appreciated. So I'm going to go out here and tell everyone that it's great. And anything that's not great, it's because it's not my fault, which I think you said, I think the avatar is cracking. So yeah, I agree with you. Unless there's significant change and direction injected into this, it's going to fall apart.
I'm almost hesitant to use this terminology, but I'm going to use it. He was elected as a savior to those who voted for him. And a nation that needs a savior is basically announcing it no longer has any trust in itself. I think those are chickens that are going to come home to roost, in my Appalachian dialect, in the coming years. And that now I'm really depressed. So let's move on to something funny. How about that?
As the wheels start to come off, let's go to our second pour here. This one is the Patriot Games.
All right, people, let me frame this for you. A boy and a girl from each location will be selected. They will be brought to the Capitol, in which they compete.
This is the Hunger Games?
Yeah.
We're talking about the Patriot Games, okay, Robbie? This is a 4-day high school athletics competition for the 250th anniversary. One male, one female athlete from each state. No transgender athletes are allowed.
Absolutely no trans, folks. Men's are fine. You can be trans in the men's.
Well, it's hard to say men's when you're talking about high school, but the boys events.
Boys.
So I'm kind of wondering if maybe they should cancel that AMC subscription there in the White House, or maybe Turner Classic Movies, whatever it is. They got to
every time you turn the TV on, the Hunger Games is on one of the episodes.
Cancel the movie channels, because first it was Escape from Alcatraz. We're getting a fourth Rush Hour. I mean, they got to stop playing movies. And the man needs to sleep. He needs to sleep.
He's watching way too much TV. Something's going on.
This is a good idea. Let's do this. Why hasn't anybody pitted all the children of the country to death?
I'm curious. I have to admit, I've not researched this at all, because when I first saw it, I thought it was an Onion article from the internet. I thought it was completely ridiculous. I mean, I thought someone was making fun of him. And then I saw a video of it, and I thought that has to be AI generated. That there is no way this is real. And then I did some research, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely real. Now, what is high school athletics? What sport is that? What are they going to do? Is it track and field?
I think they're just going to go out into a field and try to kill each other.
All right. So going back to the main premise here of an avatar that is failing. So phase one, you can blame others, check. You can try to control the narrative, check. And then you can rely on spectacle. It's like when I was a kid and I would wave my left hand and then slap my brother in the face with my right hand. I mean, that's the equivalent. It's like, look over here, look over here, look over here. Wham! And so this is spectacle. And, it does call back to the Romans, give them bread and circuses, that if you can keep the people entertained, it's pageantry, which he loves. He loves his parades and he loves his buildings. I guess we're going to get a new Arc de Triomphe or something in DC soon. So there's nothing useful to the American people about this. Nothing. There's not a single useful element to this. I think it's falling under Health and Human Services. I think it's like, Kennedy's going to like officiate this thing. It's going to be about physical
Oh my
health
God, I
or
hope he does it
whatever.
with his shirt off.
And a pair of jeans.
Just a pair of jeans, shirtless,
Right. I want to see him back in the gym in jeans, him and Hegseth.
flying around on the monkey bars.
But, ultimately, what does an avatar need? It needs crowds. It needs to continue to be inflated. And this is a way, I guess, to get crowds. Now, I don't think people are going to get excited about this. I think it's a miss. I cannot imagine this actually gaining much actual traction. I can't imagine my neighbors, like, I'm staying at home. I got to watch these Patriot games. And the only way that they would watch is if these kids are beating each other to death. And then we'll watch.
Man, we probably watch it. Yeah. Actually, what you just said challenges a viewpoint that I've had. And I like that. So much of what we've talked about to this point screams about this lack of understanding or this lack of seeing what's actually going on economically from all these perspectives. And what I felt like that was saying was that he's only being told the things that he wants to hear. I believe the other day he had mentioned that gas was $1.99 a gallon, which is not accurate. Nowhere in the U.S. is there a $1.99 average, at least that I'm aware.
0.14% of gas stations in the country on that particular day did have a 199, or the day after. 0.14. 0.14%.
Okay, so there were gas stations, but the average was significantly higher than that.
Significantly. And we're all paying it. So it's not like we fell for that.
I don't know. Is it a fall for it, or is it this is what he's being told? So is he lying?
When's the last time you think he actually filled his own car up with gas? Ever? Never?
Ever, yeah, never. But that's what I guess that's the thing is if somebody is telling him this, if this is what he's being told by the people around him, that, hey, look, gas is $1.99, and then he goes out and says it. Is he lying, or is he just conveying what he believes to be reality? The problem, obviously, being that the rest of us paying for the gas just filled up my car like $4.50 a gallon. So this reminds me of that Seinfeld episode where Jerry was going to take a polygraph, and he went to George, of course, to ask how to get past the polygraph. And George said, I can't teach you how to do it, but it's not a lie if you don't think it's a lie. So is he lying, or is this just his reality? But with this Patriot game thing, the desperation of spectacle really does get you into that thought of, well, maybe he does know that the wheels are coming off and I need to get more attention. So I don't know what it is, but I'm confused.
You opened up a can there because there's several things there. And I'm going to start with this potentiality that he is an automaton that is actually just being utilized and fed lines and is really not aware. Now, I'm not making the claim that he has dementia or anything like that. I am going to make the claim that in order to govern effectively, the people have to be legible to those who are governing. And what I mean by that is that whoever is governing a state needs to be able to understand the reality of their people. So think about things like censuses and average incomes, tax burdens, all the things that governments track in order to keep track of their people. A lot of it's just numbers. What really it comes down to is something that's often much more difficult for our ruling class. And even though we don't technically have a ruling class, if you look at who gets into office and how long they stay in Washington, D.C., we do have a ruling class. And the longer you're in the ruling class, the farther away you get from the reality of being an American citizen and what it's actually like. Now, factor in that this is a billionaire who has never known what it's like to struggle financially. He's never known what it's like to get out of your car and fill up your gas tank and look at the gas prices. He's never went in and bought eggs. And when he was talking about eggs in his speech, I found it ridiculous because this is a guy that's never been to a grocery store in his life. He has never been to a grocery store, and I guarantee that. I don't have any science to guarantee it, but I can almost guarantee it. So if you're that out of touch with what it actually is like to be an American citizen, a person, just an average Joe, how can you lead that nation? Now, they've done it for years. We've had lots of very wealthy presidents. That's not atypical, but the extent of his disconnect from the American people is somewhat unique. He's never lived a normal life, an average life. And what he was very good at in the run up to his election and to his pursuit of power, or his re-pursuit of power, because he also has this pattern of getting power and failing. And if you look back through his life, this has happened over and over again, that he's great at the pursuit of, but then when he achieves it, he can't hold it. He goes bankrupt. The businesses end up failing. And then he builds again. And he's so good at the building phase. And he's so bad at the maintenance phase. And this was true in his last presidency, that he just couldn't handle the kinds of things that get thrown at a president and that you can't expect. And he wanted to blame everyone, blame just anyone and everyone. But ultimately, the buck stops with the president, and humility counts a lot. And those are two things that he just doesn't have. He does not have an understanding of what it is to be an American citizen, and humility is just not in his wheelhouse. So what I think we will see is that the avatar, him as the avatar, he did well, that he basically was just absorbing and amplifying the very simple, non-nuanced, I won't call them simple because their concerns are actually legit, but they're non-nuanced, and he simplified them, and he intensified them, he concentrated them, and then he pushed them right back out into the crowd. And that's how he gained power. But now he's in a job that is ridiculously nuanced and complex. Nuance is what they start the day with. Nuance is what they have for lunch. Nuance is how they close their day. So it's really complicated. And this is where he's going to fail, to not be able to handle. And we will see him try to continue to simplify things that just can't be. And one of the ways to do that is put on a spectacle, put on a show. He knows how to be a promoter. He'll try to promote it, make it a big deal. This will fall flat. This is not something that's going to catch. No one's going to be interested in this. I have no interest in watching a bunch of high school kids
Fight to the death?
well engage in athletics, whatever that is.
It would probably be push-ups and sit-ups.
Running around a track and some I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do.
But what if they're playing pickleball?
I definitely don't want to watch that unless they get to come up with their own team names. And I guarantee you how many of them will be erotically bent, like paddle me or what. I would watch that. I would watch that just for the funny factor. But yes, this is simplification. This is creating spectacle. This is me waving my left hand so I can smack my brother in the head with my right.
Hey, it's Rob from Shrink the Nation. As my friend David so eloquently states at the beginning of the show, we are clinicians, but we're not your clinician. We love to joke around and dive into the tough topics, but there's something really important we need to say. If you're struggling with your mental health or facing substance use issues, we want you to know you're not alone. We have dedicated our professional careers to mental health, and we care deeply about it. It's okay to ask for help. Reaching out to a professional in your area could be the first step toward feeling better. Don't wait. There's support out there, and it works. Please take that first step. We want you to be well. Now let's get back to the show. Oh, and don't tell David I said he was eloquent. He'll be insufferable.
All right, so we'll get to our third pour. When the White House becomes a comment section, reports are describing new plaques beneath presidential portraits that read like pointed judgments. Praise for some, mockery for others, prompting backlash, including criticism from friendly media voices. It's a move that looks less like civil continuity and more like public branding warfare.
So, for our tens of listeners, there's now a hall of presidents in the White House, and has pictures of each president. And then it has on a bronze plaque, like a short biography, their accomplishments, whatever. And they've become interesting. One thing, the photo of President Biden is now a photo of an auto pen, which is a new concept for me. I didn't realize an auto pen existed, but as it turns out, it does. And apparently lots of politicians use them because they sign lots of things. I would like to have an auto pen because I sign a lot of things. But so it's a photo of an auto pen. Can you read? Do you have what the plaque says for Biden or for Obama? Or any of them, because they've all been interestingly edited.
Yeah, for Biden, it says Sleepy Joe Biden was by far the worst president in American history, taking office as a result of the most corrupt election ever seen in the United States. Biden oversaw a series of unprecedented disasters that brought our nation to the brink of destruction. His policies caused the highest inflation ever recorded, leading the U.S. dollar to lose more than 20% of its value in 4 years. His Green New scam surrendered American energy dominance, and by abolishing the southern border, Biden let 21 million people from all over the world pour into the United States, including from prisons, jails, mental institutions, and insane asylums. His Afghanistan disaster was among the most humiliating events in American history and resulted in the murder of 13 brave American service members, with many others gravely wounded. Seeing Biden's devastating weakness, Russia invaded Ukraine, and Hamas terrorists launched the heinous October 7th attack on Israel. Nicknamed both Sleepy and Crooked, Joe Biden was dominated by his radical left handlers. They and their allies in the fake news media attempted to cover up his severe mental decline and his unprecedented use of the auto pen. Following his humiliating debate loss to President Trump in the big June 2024 debate, he was forced to withdraw from his campaign for re-election in disgrace. Biden weaponized law enforcement against his political opponent while also prosecuting many other innocent people. He left office issuing blanket pardons to radical Democrat criminals and thugs, as well as members of the Biden crime family. But despite it all, President Trump would get reelected in a landslide and, all caps, save America.
It's like a Truth Social post. If you have to carve your enemies into the hallway, you're not strong. You're haunted.
That said it all. Do we need to go any further? No, we do. We do.
Well, if I was part of the White House press corps, my only question is, hey, can you spell classy? So this actually does fit my avatar theory, believe it or not. So you do something like this when you need your environment itself to affirm your self-image. It's a structural tell. The self needs reinforcement by architecture, that it's just not enough. His self-image, the avatar's image, is drifting, is deflating. And when you have to prop yourself up in bronze, you're really not trusting history to do it for you. And this one's really stunning. And it, part of it's just a lack of class. I mean, it really is a lack of humility and a lack of class. That's distressing in and of itself, and it's unprecedented. Certainly, there have been other presidents in history who have not liked their predecessors. Without a doubt, politicians compete at a very high level against one another, and that often creates some animosity. But they've had restraint because they've had respect for the office. And this is a utter lack of respect for the office of the President of the United States. It was also rewriting history that, as it turns out, there's zero evidence whatsoever to support that the 2020 election was anything but fair. No data, no evidence. And because of all those lawsuits, it's been looked at. So nothing came of it. And to this day, even though the group is in power, if there was that much evidence, just send it out, show us. It's just not there. There's nothing there. But this is a stunning example of a lack of respect for the office of the presidency.
I guess more than just saying I didn't like the guy before me, it's saying I don't particularly have respect for the position that I'm currently holding enough to follow the norms and the typical rules that are there. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I just wonder if it's bigger. It's that the presidency is a reserved position. I mean, it is one where you follow the norms. As I was even reading it, I wonder who wrote that.
I think I know who wrote that.
Well, and I guess that's just it. It would be why? Why give free rent in your brain to your predecessor like that to take the time? I mean, it took me that long to read it. How long did it take to write all that could have been done, spent doing the job?
Well,
Just
since
the
it
job.
sounds stupid, not long. I think that was a stream of consciousness rant. I don't think that was a thought out. No one was worried about where's the comma and the periods go. This was
Clearly, that's why it's so hard to read. It's disappointing, I think, that the pressure of the position of the office is getting to the point that rather than, again, trying to actually be the executive, make the changes, especially when there's so much power. I think one of the disappointing things to really look at is when you have the legislative branch abdicating their position as much as they have to let really anything happen rather than just going forth and making change to type out a rant and then say, put this on the wall. And I feel terrible for the poor person who had to make that. Somebody had to make that. Somebody had to go and do AutoCAD or something and actually have this thing printed and get rid of the old plaque. I think we all understand that at some point he won't be there.
and it'll change.
And this will all just go back. Yeah, it'll just go back to whatever the previous bio was, as will his. I imagine whatever his bio was probably won't change much. It'll be he was the 47th president of the United States. Here's what he did.
Mhm.
Not he ruined this hallway with Chris. It just won't be that.
From last week we ended up talking a little bit about those with a narcissistic structure have difficulty casting out into the future and a future that they do not exist. And because of that, because they cannot really envision a scenario in which they are not the main protagonist, these are the kinds of things that happen. These are the kinds of things you do when you're not really thinking down the line. And the fact that when you cease to exist, so does all this. There's a reason there's some continuity of history, and that's usually because it's just. And over time, this is going to leave. So it does make me question his sense of his place in history. So this strikes me as someone who's trying to freeze their place in history in bronze. That, if I put it in bronze, and I'm surprised it wasn't in gold, but except for Biden's would have been in bronze. But when you try to freeze it like this, it's not real. I think it's serving a psychological purpose, but it does make me question what he feels. And that's, again, going back to the avatar thing, that as long as he was having all this adulation and approval poured into him, he felt powerful. My speculation at this point is that he is feeling his power waning. His support is waning. The legibility that he once had with his audience is waning. He doesn't understand where they're at. And in fact, he's arguing against where they're at. Where they're at is, hey, I can't afford my life. The affordability is a problem. Nothing's really changing for me. Those are where real Americans are. So he's out of touch with that. And I think he's feeling it. So he does this speech and he does the plaques and he does Patriot games, which I can't not laugh every time I say that. I just can't.
We'll just call it the Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games. So we got the Hunger Games now. And it's an effort to shore up all these psychological dangers for him.
I still go back to at what point even just in history, when you go back and look at this, do you say it's because he didn't want to hear the truth? And so he surrounded himself with people who just wouldn't tell him the truth? Or do you say they're the ones who are just telling him what he wants to hear? And is it all of it?
In medicine, we often talk about positive feedback loops, and they're usually very bad things, and they usually lead to really bad medical problems. And a positive feedback loop is one that feeds in on itself. So this thing increases, which causes that thing to increase, which causes the original thing to increase, which causes that thing to increase. And it becomes a cycle that just goes out of control. And I think that's what we're looking at, is a positive feedback loop. This is a man who likes to dictate his own reality. Is it part of the narcissistic structure? Yeah, it is. But He likes to dictate his own reality. So then he pulls in people around him who support his own reality. And it becomes a positive feedback loop that these are the people that he brought to him that were basically willing to support his reality. And then on it goes, and it starts to spiral out of control. And there is a certain sense here that we're reaching that point of a spiral out of control, that he is more and more out of touch with reality. And I don't mean that in a psychotic way. I mean that he's just not getting the information. He has no background to have the basis of that information. He's never put gas in his car. He's never gone to a grocery store. He doesn't even know the right questions to ask. He's also not engaged with his populace. For a long time there, he was out on the road. So now, I think he was actually talking to his supporters? No, he was not. He was giving speeches, but he was getting feedback based on their boos and their cheers. And whatever they cheered about, he naturally can identify and he can highlight those things. So he was getting that. He's not getting that now. He's in an echo chamber, and that echo chamber basically supports whatever it takes to make him feel good, confident, what they want him to feel.
It's a real shame. I mean, truthfully, one of the things that he does so well is he's great at putting his finger on the pulse of what is wrong and then at least identifying that and then saying this needs to change. The tragedy of this situation is that when you surround yourself with people who won't tell you that something is bad or that there is something wrong, his ability to diagnose it is gone. His ability to say, I think this would be good. We need to change this. And you've seen him do that. He flip-flops very readily when he identifies that there is some issue that, was actually a really great strength of his to be able to diagnose the problem. But he's just not hearing it now. He's being told, he's being fed by his own desire to only hear that things are going great. But now, as he's hearing that things aren't great, he doesn't seem to be able to hold that. He seems to really struggles with it. And we pointed out this entire episode, blames somebody else for it. And he's not putting his fingers on the pulse to say, let's change it. Let's go in a different direction. I think driven by him and driven by the people around him.
In separation from the pulse.
It hamstrings his ability to do what really got him to position in the first place.
Yeah. So I haven't done a quote. So David Drink, this is a quote from George Orwell. He who controls the past controls the future. And that's from 1984. When I saw this story, I immediately thought of Orwell. Actually, the immediate thought I had was, this is Orwellian, but this is an effort to control the past, that you can reframe the past, you can rewrite the past. And if you can rewrite the past, guess what? You also have control of the future. So this is an effort to enshrine him as the greatest ever, regardless of what the data says or what reality says or what the people say. I think it fits beautifully into this theme of a crashing or a cracking, I shouldn't say crashing at this point, but a cracking avatar.
Well, if you came here to be relieved, what is it? It was a rough week for the administration. You had obviously a lot of anxiety and a desire to kind of regain control. If that's got you down, what are we offering up here?
Well, I'll tell you, what I'm often struck by is a very long quote. Drink again. A long quote from Carl Jung. And I'm going to paraphrase this quote because ultimately it's a paragraph long. But basically, he talked about what is the value of psychotherapy. And he said, psychotherapy is not designed to alleviate your distress. It's designed to bring understanding and make you be a full-fledged adult. That is an incredible paraphrase. So I'm not really offering relief today, other than the image of me waving my left hand and then smacking my little brother in the face with my right. That might bring you some joy, maybe, particularly if you know my little brother. What I'm offering is maybe some insight, some understanding that you can see it from this frame. I know personally, one of the reasons we started doing this was because of our own anxiety about what was going on, and we were struggling with it and we were overwhelmed by it. And what the show has helped us do is drink more. And that's probably positive. No, no, actually, that's not the positive part. This show has forced me to actually look at things through a lens that is one step backwards from being mired. You can't be the general in the field if you're down in the trenches. And I guess what my hope is for our tens of listeners who are a unique group of individuals who've been drawn to a very niche podcast, that what this allows for them to feel like is that they can pull themselves out of the trenches and see the overall battle space, if you will, and have some reassurance that these are predictable psychological phenomena. They will play themselves out.
You're definitely presenting the Jonathan Haidt argument of what we're doing. Take a step back and looking at both sides.
Yeah. Hey, Johnny, if you want to come on the show,
Yeah.
shoot us an email. Would love to have you on.
I'm sure Jonathan Haidt listens to us every episode. I bet that's the case.
6 degrees of separation, Dave. Someone in this audience likely knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows Johnny.
That's right. Let's get him on. Here's what I'll say is if the circus is starting to concern you, it does look like the train's about to break down. If you like this circus, well, enjoy the show for the time being. Hopefully you'll figure out that the thing that made him so popular was his ability to look at the problems and actually come up with some kind of idea for solution.
I would not hold my breath.
You just gotta start doing that again if that's how he wants to make it through this. But otherwise, it looks like Rome is a burning. All right, prescriptions.
God.
I got one. If your political argument only works while yelling, posting in all caps, or standing in front of a crowd, it doesn't work. Real ideas survive indoor voices.
Okay. Politicians must stop drafting teenagers into adult anxiety. Let kids run around a track without turning them into symbols. If your arguments need a pep rally, your argument is weak.
If you feel the need to rewrite history immediately, you're not confident in the present. Time is the only endorsement that matters. Anyone rushing it is nervous.
Americans must stop using speeches as emotional medication. If your heart rate drops because a man on TV sounds certain, that's not clarity, it's sedation. You're not informed, you're being regulated.
Well, thank you for all those who decide to stick around. Hopefully your pulses are a little bit slower. Your blood pressure has gone down just a touch. We're all working through this and we'll make it. So go ahead and smash that subscribe, hit like, share with everybody that you possibly can. Just don't do it on socials.
Right. Stay off social media.
Well, that was it.
Except for us.
All right, we'll cue up that music and we are out.